This is Miss Meyer, and today, for today's video, we are going to talk about the causes of the Civil War. So we're going to discuss a couple of things that went on to push forward for the Civil War. So the first one we're going to talk about is the Missouri Compromise. Now, slavery was always an issue in the United States, and as we push forward towards the Civil War, you can see when we're discussing this that the states were pretty much split. Some were pro-slavery and some were against slavery. Now, in our Congress, in our legislative branch, they were pretty much divided. It was half slave states, half free states. The problem was that larger states had more representatives in the legislative branch. And the larger states up north were the ones who were against slavery. The smaller states down in the south had less representatives in the legislative branch, were pro-slavery. And that was always an issue, and that's why we had the 3/5 compromise. Do you guys remember what the 3/5 compromise was? And I put it in for you right there. It's going to be your next slide. Okay, so the southern states and the northern states were always at a battle with one another, but they were balanced out. So there was never a ton of free states that were going to make all the decisions or a ton of slave states that were going to make all the decisions. They were pretty much equal, and they were always kind of in a deadlock. Now, what happened with the Missouri Compromise happened in 1819, and that's when Missouri wanted to be admitted as a state. Now, Missouri wanted to come in as a free state. Now, if Missouri was a free state, that would mean that they would have more free states than slave states. If they had more free states, the legislation that would be passed would be much more favorable to the free states. And the southern states would kind of not get any say. For example, if, let's just say we have more girls in our class than boys in our class, and we said everybody is going to vote on whether we make pink our classroom color that we're going to paint the walls, or blue our classroom color that we're going to paint the walls. Now, some girls will say, I can't stand pink. I personally love pink. Pink, pink, pink. Blue, blue, blue. Pink. But I mean, if we did that, the girls would have more of a say because we have more girls. So that's what was going on right now. If Missouri would be entered in as a free state, the free states would have more of a say on what went on in the United States. So this was an issue. So what they did was they came up with a compromise, something that they can do together to kind of make everybody happy. The person who put that in was Henry Clay. Now, what Henry Clay did is he came up with this deal, and it said if the southern states agreed to the admission of Maine as a free state, Missouri could then be, excuse me, Maine was the free state. Go back, sorry. So if they allowed Maine to come in as a free state, Missouri could be admitted as a slave state, and there it would still be a balanced thing. Now, the problem was going to come up again because as more people came to the United States, new states were going to pop up. At this time, even Texas wasn't officially a state. So the stars at night are big and bright, deep in the heart of Texas. So you had all of these places coming up, popping up, new states, and it was gonna, it was gonna be very, very difficult for them to remain balanced number of slave states and free states. So, in addition to this compromise of allowing Maine in as a free state and Missouri as a slave state, they said that all the lands acquired in the Louisiana Purchase north of 36 degrees north latitude, so all of the states above a specific line, because remember we got all that land in the Louisiana Purchase from Napoleon, they said all those places, any state that would be formed in that land above 36 degrees latitude were going to be free. And any states below that line, during the 36 degrees latitude, would be slave states. Okay? This was a compromise. This was, basically making everyone happy.
Happy, happy, joy, joy, happy, happy, joy, joy, happy, happy, joy, joy, happy, happy.
But it didn't completely appease the situation, because there were people that were saying, well, we shouldn't be told whether or not we're going to be a slave state or a free state. We should make that decision for ourselves.
Don't tell me what to do!
So you see a lot of anger and animosity brewing during this time because they didn't want to be told what to do.
Don't tell me what to do!
Or what to think. Now, in today's society, we see some of that kind of going on right now. We see people saying, don't tell us what to do. Give the states more rights. If you watch the news, you see those kind of things happening right now. One of the things that is big in the news right now is this new health care plan that's happening, which you see, I think Governor Rick Perry of Texas was saying that he did not agree that he should be told, or people should be, made to have this healthcare decision. So even today, we're still seeing, people in states here in the United States, which are, clamoring for more state rights, or, pushing towards more, national things. So the same thing was happening during the Civil War. It wasn't about healthcare, it was about slavery, where you had states saying that states' rights, states should make that decision for themselves, whether or not they should be slave or free states. And you had other states saying that they should just, do what the government was saying, and basically just allow those states above that line to be free and states below that line to be slave states. So that was the Missouri Compromise. All right, so as time went on, things continued to brew. Things were continuing to become very, very tense. And like I said, as more and more people came to the United States, new states were popping up. Territories were becoming states. And once a territory applied for statehood, they had to make the decision on whether or not they were going to be a free state or a slave state. Well, the new state that was popping up during this time, the next one that was coming, was California. Now, California had decided that they were going to be a free state and not allow slavery. The problem is that if California became a free state, there would be an uneven number of free states and slave states. And if that happened, that meant that there would be more free states than there were slave states. And the free states were going to be the ones to make the decisions in the legislative branch. And that created a big problem. So once again, Henry Clay came up with another compromise, and we call this compromise the Compromise of 1850. And basically, Henry Clay said that California is going to be allowed to be a free state. Now, with California being a free state, the organization of the new territories, because they had new states that were getting ready to come up in New Mexico and Utah, and they said these new states that were coming up in New Mexico and Utah could make the decision whether or not they wanted to be a slave state or a free state by themselves. They weren't going to be told what to do. And also, as part of this compromise, Henry Clay said that they were going to amp up the Fugitive Slave Act. Now, what the Fugitive Slave Act was is that it was basically a law saying that you could not help runaway slaves. So if a slave that was, say, living in Louisiana escaped and ran away to, I don't know, Massachusetts, they would not be free, they would be fugitive slaves. And part of this Fugitive Slave Act was that you would be in trouble, that you would go to jail and things would happen to you if you helped this slave. Because what they would need was something they called freedom papers. And they would have to carry it all their time. And there's a new movie, and my daughter moved my chair down. I just felt it. I gotta move it back up. All right. So in the movie 12 Years as a Slave, how he's sold back into slavery, and we'll talk about that later on. But they have papers, a little document, and when they are stopped, you know, in the North, they say, "Let me see your papers." They would have to show proof that they were free people. They were not slaves, and if they were escaped slaves, they wouldn't have these freedom papers. So, but a lot of times people would help them out. Like Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad, there were people along the way to the North that would help out free slaves in their effort to get to safety. There were people that would help them make freedom papers and hide them and give them places to live and food to eat and help them do that kind of things. But if you were caught doing that, you were in serious trouble from the Fugitive Slave Act. And part of the Compromise of 1850 put into place by Henry Clay was to amp up that, kind of like make it more of a violation, to get into more trouble if you're doing that. Because the slave states were saying that the United States and Henry Clay were more favorable to the northern states. So by putting in this Fugitive Slave Act and being really, really proactive and, you know, just aggressive on those who were helping the slaves, Henry Clay was able to kind of ease the southern states a little bit and say, don't get so upset. Now, while this was kind of like, you know, helping the situation, it was really like putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg.
Band-Aid. Bobo.
Like if you put a Band-Aid on a broken leg, like my mom thinks that, you know, ibuprofen cures everything. That's her thing. She always says that if, you got sick, take some ibuprofen. But
what's the best medicine to take if you're hurt?
Ibuprofen.
Eventually it's going to come back. You know, it's going to, the pain is going to return. The same thing is going on here with these compromises. They're like putting Band-Aids or giving ibuprofen to some kind of serious illness. Yes, that's going to help the situation temporarily, but in the long run, it's still going to be a problem. And that's what all these compromises were doing. It was not solving the issue at all. It was just dealing with it temporarily. Okay, so we're going to now talk about the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Now remember, as part of the Louisiana Purchase, a huge passage of land was acquired by the United States. And this kind of dealt with the very last piece. So in 1854, they needed to decide on what they were going to do with this big chunk that they had left. And they decided they were going to make two states out of it. They were going to make Kansas and they were going to make Nebraska. And they were going to let these states decide for themselves whether or not they wanted to be slave or free states. Now, Nebraska was pretty clear-cut. They decided, you know, that they wanted to be a free state. But there were a lot of people in Kansas that said that they wanted Kansas to be a slave state. Now, there were just as many people in Kansas who said that they wanted Kansas to be a free state. So this was this battleground that was going on. They couldn't make up their minds and make a decision on whether or not they wanted to be free or a slave state. And there was lots and lots of turmoil and lots of confrontation. Eventually, it became a battleground. There were teams of people in both camps in that state that constantly fought with one another. And inevitably, in any kind of situation where emotions are high, you know, people are getting all riled up, things turn bad. And it did. A big fight broke out. A couple of people were killed. And they called that Bleeding Kansas because there was bloodshed. But what this did, this Kansas-Nebraska Act, by allowing Kansas and Nebraska to make the decision on whether or not to be a free or slave state by themselves, they were overthrowing the Missouri Compromise, the first compromise that was started. And what this did was basically show Americans, especially the Southerners, that things were not going to get any better. There was going to be a constant battle of this going on. So now these southern states are really starting to say, look at what's going on. It's getting worse and worse. We're not, we want to do what we want to do. We don't want the United States telling us that we can't have slavery. We don't want this. So they started to talk about secession, moving away, separating from the United States, becoming their own country. We start hearing a lot about that. And what happens is we see a new person running for presidential office, Abraham Lincoln. And a lot of these southern states who at this whole time are getting, all riled up, and they're getting angry and angry and angry, they start saying that if this new person, if Abraham Lincoln gets elected president, we are going to leave the Union and become our own country. So all of that is going on right now. Lots of emotions building up in the United States. And that's what we're going to talk about next class.
Here's a lovely modern day meat dinner. It's not something I'm going to eat, but this is definitely something that you would eat in today's time. What I'm going to give you guys is a tutorial on something that the Civil War soldiers ate. Dinner like this was not something that happened, and if it was, this meat would have either been horse meat or dog meat. So this is either neither one of them, but if it was Civil War time. Now the Confederates didn't have anything like this. What they did have was something called hardtack, and I'm going to show you guys how to make it.